For 123 years, the original manuscript of Helena Blavatsky remained sealed by the Theosophical Society itself. Why? The descriptions were too graphic, too frightening. She didn't speak of light at the end of the tunnel. She described the screams, the freezing of time, the returning pain, and the exact moment when your soul decides whether to continue or not. And what she revealed in the 10th stage was cut from the published edition. But this video brings every detail. The yellowed pages, discovered in a hidden compartment within the Society's archives in Adyar, India, contained handwritten notes in Blavatsky's distinctive script. The ink had faded to a rusty brown, but the words remained clear, terrifyingly clear. When the archivist first opened the leather-bound volume, a strange scent filled the room, like ozone before a storm. Some say the book itself seemed to pulse with energy. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the enigmatic founder of modern theosophy, wrote in 1886 a confidential report describing the 10 immediate phases after physical death. Stored at the Adyar headquarters under the code Velum 71, it only came to light after an internal leak in 2009. The text describes in direct language what happens to all of us seconds after our last breath. And in the 3rd stage, she reports, a sound that all souls hear, but no one among the living would recognize. From which city are you watching this? I want to map how far this occult knowledge is resurfacing. Few people realize that Blavatsky's most significant work wasn't The Secret Doctrine or Isis Unveiled, the books that made her famous. It was this hidden manuscript, written during a period when she claimed to be in direct communication with entities she called the Masters. These beings, according to her, existed beyond the physical plane and possessed knowledge about the true nature of reality, consciousness, and what happens after we die. The timeline of this extraordinary document reads like a mystery novel spanning more than a century. 1886, Blavatsky enters a supervised trance and dictates 37 pages about the soul's journey. Witnesses report that during this session, the room temperature dropped dramatically, and small objects around her began to move without being touched. Her voice changed, becoming deeper, more resonant, as if someone else was speaking through her. 1891. With her death, the material is archived as potentially destabilizing. The Society's leadership, concerned about the graphic nature of the descriptions and fearing public panic, votes to keep it secret. Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, reportedly said, "This knowledge is too potent, too raw for the unprepared mind." 1949. A partial summary. Appears in the London Library, but without the 3 most disturbing stages. This censored version creates ripples in esoteric circles, but scholars dismiss it as fiction, unable to verify its authenticity without the original source. 2009. An anonymous scanner releases a complete copy on an encrypted forum. The digital copy spreads rapidly through occult networks before the Society can respond, igniting debate about its authenticity and implications. But the most disturbing point in the document involves a visual phenomenon that cannot be simulated by living brains. What makes this manuscript extraordinary isn't just its content, but the methodical, almost clinical way Blavatsky describes the immediate aftermath of death. Unlike religious texts that speak in metaphors and parables, she presents her findings as empirical observations. And what she describes challenges everything modern science tells us about consciousness and its boundaries. Let's examine the first evidence, the double separation. The soul does not leave at once, Blavatsky states. It hears its own brain shutting down in layers. The manuscript describes what she calls the ether mirror effect, as if the deceased saw 2 versions of themselves trying to wake up. This duality creates what Blavatsky terms the first terror, the realization that you are simultaneously in your body and outside it. You can see medical professionals working on your physical form while you float above, unable to communicate. The sensation, according to the manuscript, is not peaceful, it's disorienting, even frightening. Your consciousness splits between 2 perspectives, creating a fractured awareness that most souls find deeply disturbing. Have you ever experienced that moment between sleep and wakefulness, where you're aware but unable to move? Multiply that sensation 1,000-fold, and you begin to approach what Blavatsky describes. Your mind is fully alert, yet you've lost connection to the biological mechanism that has carried you throughout life. You die, conscious that you are dying. And then she describes the spiral field of symbols that appears, different for each soul. These symbols aren't random. They represent the accumulated thoughts, actions, and intentions of your entire life. Some appear larger, more luminous than others, representing the dominant patterns of your existence. For some, symbols of compassion and love shine brightest. For others, patterns of fear, anger, or regret dominate the field. The manuscript includes detailed drawings of these symbolic fields from various case studies. Remarkably, modern near-death experience research has uncovered similar reports of symbolic visions, though researchers typically attribute these to neurons firing randomly during brain shutdown. But the second stage brings something even more unsettling. In the second stage, the most common sound, it isn't music, it's crying out. Blavatsky documents hundreds of accounts where the soul relives the sounds of the most painful moments in life. This isn't limited to physical pain, it encompasses emotional wounds as well. The husband who never told his wife he loved her hears her silent tears. The mother who was too harsh with her child hears their stifled sobs. The manuscript details how this auditory reckoning serves a purpose. It begins the process of clearing karmic debts by forcing the soul to acknowledge the impact of its actions. The acoustics are described as unnaturally clear, as if the soul gains a heightened sense of hearing that can detect emotional frequencies previously imperceptible. The transition begins with what you tried to forget, writes Blavatsky. This confrontation with suppressed memories and their emotional impact creates what she calls the necessary wound, an opening through which transformation can begin. Have you ever had a memory so painful you pushed it away, only to have it resurface in dreams? In this second stage, all such memories return at once, their emotional content amplified beyond what the physical brain could process. There is nowhere to hide from yourself, but it's in the fourth stage that judgment occurs, except there is no judge. As powerful as these first stages are, they merely set the stage for what Blavatsky describes as the third piece of evidence, the chamber of unspoken truths. She calls this moment the curved mirror. In it, you see everything you didn't say. The soul reviews its omissions, its silences, its broken promises. Unlike the conventional idea of life review, which focuses on actions taken, this stage reveals the roads not traveled, the truth suppressed, the love undeclared. Blavatsky's description suggests this might be the most painful stage for many souls. Here you witness not what you did, but what you might have done, she writes. The words unspoken often leave deeper wounds than those uttered in anger. The manuscript describes how souls react with profound shock upon seeing how different their lives could have been had they found the courage to speak their truth. Some try to return to their bodies, desperate for a second chance. But by this point, the connection has usually been severed. The sensory experience of this stage is primarily visual, but with a quality unlike physical sight. Blavatsky describes it as seeing with the entire being, where each potential alternate path appears as branching reality tunnels extending from crucial moments of choice. These tunnels glow with varying intensity, representing the potential impact of paths not taken. You become who you caused others to become through your presence, yatyan or absence. And then the threshold guardians appear, but they're not what they seem. Most spiritual traditions describe encountering beings after death, angels, demons, ancestors, or guides. Blavatsky's account differs dramatically. The threshold guardians, according to her manuscript, are not external entities, but manifestations of your own consciousness. They appear in forms drawn from your beliefs, expectations, and fears. If you expect judgment, they will judge. If you expect salvation, they will save. If you expect oblivion, they offer it. These guardians are, in essence, your last opportunity to cling to familiar patterns before the deeper transformation begins. The manuscript includes testimonies from various cultural perspectives, showing how these guardians conform to religious and cultural expectations. A devoted Christian sees Christ or angels. A Buddhist encounters beings resembling bodhisattvas. An atheist might see respected figures from their life or symbolic representations of natural forces. But all are reflections, externalizations, of the soul's own consciousness facing itself in the final reckoning. As we move toward the culmination of Blavatsky's revelations, a pattern emerges. Each stage strips away another layer of illusion, another level of self-deception, preparing the soul for the ultimate choice. In the 9th stage, the soul receives an invitation: proceed forward to a timeless realm or return for another incarnation. But Blavatsky discovered something beyond. In the 10th stage, and which was removed from the official version, she describes a field where souls encounter fragments of their parallel lives. And most shocking of all, most souls refuse to cross over. They flee. The silence that followed. This revelation at the first reading of the manuscript was reportedly so profound that one attendee fainted. According to witnesses, Blavatsky herself was troubled by this discovery, often waking in the night calling out about the pattern that cannot be broken. This 10th stage reveals that consciousness exists across multiple timelines simultaneously. Each soul is connected to countless versions of itself, living out different possibilities based on different choices. Upon death, these timelines become visible, creating what Blavatsky called the ultimate vertigo, the overwhelming realization that you have always been more than you perceived yourself to be. Modern quantum physics has begun exploring similar concepts through theories of multiple worlds and quantum superposition. What if Blavatsky, through direct mystical experience, glimpsed what scientists are only now beginning to theorize? The reason most souls flee this revelation is simple yet profound. The human ego, even after physical death, cannot initially bear the dissolution of its perceived uniqueness. Confronted with infinite versions of itself, the soul retreats to the familiar. Hence, the cycle of reincarnation continues. And the reason for this flight is contained in a single hand-drawn symbol that has never been fully deciphered. The implications of these discoveries are staggering. If Blavatsky's observations are accurate, death is not an ending, but a progressive awakening to increasingly expanded states of consciousness. The choices we make in those crucial first moments shape our experience far more than any religious doctrine or philosophical belief could predict. If you know what to expect, you can cross over consciously, free. But if you don't know, you might relive your worst fears in an invisible cycle. Consider what this knowledge means in practical terms. The fear of death that haunts humanity might be based on a fundamental misunderstanding. We're not afraid of ceasing to exist. We're afraid of existing more fully than our limited ego can comprehend. Imagine being able to stand beside someone you love at the exact second they cross over and guide them. Several modern hospice workers have reported that patients who were exposed to modified versions of Blavatsky's descriptions experienced notably peaceful transitions. Without knowing the source, these patients were simply told what sensations to expect. The results were remarkable: reduced fear, less resistance, and what one nurse described as a sense of curious readiness, rather than dread. If you could warn just one person about these stages, who would it be? This question isn't merely rhetorical. The manuscript suggests that souls who retain awareness through these stages can actually assist others in their transition. Your knowledge could directly impact how someone you love experiences their own crossing. But there's a group that knows about the 11th stage, and they keep it beyond public reach. Throughout history, certain mystery schools and esoteric orders have claimed knowledge of stages beyond what Blavatsky described. These groups operate under strict secrecy, believing that premature exposure to such knowledge could damage the unprepared psyche. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, with which Blavatsky had connections, reportedly maintained teachings about a mysterious 11th gate that leads beyond the cycle of reincarnation entirely. Similar references appear in certain Tibetan Buddhist texts, describing states beyond even the highest heavenly realms. What if these traditions are protecting knowledge that fundamentally changes not just how we die, but how we live? The implications extend beyond individual death experiences. If consciousness continues in the manner Blavatsky describes, our entire materialist worldview requires revision. The brain may not generate consciousness, but rather receive and constrain it, like a radio tunes into existing broadcasts rather than creating them. Quantum physicist David Bohm proposed similar ideas with his concept of implicate order, suggesting that what we perceive as reality is merely a surface manifestation of deeper dimensions. Neurologist Carl Pribram independently developed holographic brain theories that complement this view, proposing that memory and consciousness may not be stored in the brain, but accessed by it from a field beyond space-time. What if Blavatsky, through direct mystical experience rather than scientific instrumentation, accessed these same truths over a century earlier? The manuscript includes detailed instructions for developing what she called continuation consciousness, practices designed to strengthen awareness to the point where it can remain coherent through the death transition. These techniques share similarities with Tibetan Phawa practices and certain advanced yogic methods, suggesting a convergence of understanding across diverse traditions. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Blavatsky's revelations is how they transform our understanding of purpose. If death is not an ending, but a threshold of expanded awareness, then life becomes preparation for that expansion. Each experience, especially those involving love and compassion, develops capacities that remain when the physical body does not. What if the 11th stage is actually the place we came from, not where we're going? This final question points to the cyclical nature of existence suggested throughout the manuscript. What if the highest stage of death is actually a return to our original state? What if we are, as many mystical traditions suggest, divine consciousness, temporarily localized in human form, forgetting our true nature only to remember it again? If so, then both life and death are parts of a greater journey of remembering who we truly are. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger once wrote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one." This perspective aligns remarkably well with Blavatsky's description of the ultimate stages of death, where individual consciousness recognizes its connection to all consciousness. The manuscript's final pages contain what appears to be a personal reflection from Blavatsky herself, written in a different ink than the main text. "Having seen beyond the veil, I return changed. Death is not what we fear, but precisely what we seek, though in our blindness we know it not. The greatest mercy is that we forget, for if we remembered the fullness from which we came, no earthly joy could satisfy, no human love could compare. We are like children playing on the shore, unaware of the ocean of consciousness from which we emerged and to which we will return." These words echo across time, challenging us to reconsider not just what happens after we die, but the very nature of who we are while we live. If you've stayed with this exploration until now, you're part of a small percentage who senses there's more to existence than the material world reveals. This isn't just information. It's an invitation to a different way of living, one informed by the continuity of consciousness beyond physical boundaries. What if you began living now as if you understood that death is not an end but a transition? How would your priorities change? What relationships would you heal? What truths would you finally speak? This knowledge has been hidden for over a century because of its power to transform not just individuals, but potentially society itself. A civilization that understands death differently would make very different choices about how to live. If these revelations resonate with something deep within you, perhaps a recognition rather than a new discovery, then you're already part of the awakening that Blavatsky foresaw. You're one of those who can walk between worlds, maintaining awareness even as consciousness expands beyond its familiar boundaries. And what if the 11th stage is actually the beginning of something entirely new, not just for individual souls, but for all of existence? Like this video if something within you recognizes the truth of what you've heard. Subscribe and activate notifications to join a community of seekers exploring the frontiers of consciousness. Share this with someone who might be ready for these revelations. Someone who has questioned, who has sensed there must be more to our existence than what we've been told. Because the greatest secret isn't what happens after we die. It's who we truly are while we live. The truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it merely whispers to those who are ready to hear.